This episode of Scrolling to Death is sponsored by Bark Technologies. Bark offers parents advanced content monitoring for all of your child's devices. Bark is literally helping to save lives and has alerted parents to millions of life-threatening situations like self-harm and severe bullying. More on Bark in the episode notes. Welcome to Scrolling to Death. I am super grateful to be joined by Representative Brandon Guffey of South Carolina. Hi, Representative Guffey.
Hey, Nikki. Thanks for having me on.
I'm so grateful to be able to talk to you. I've seen you online on press conferences and different interviews. And, I often speak to legislators or senators like you about laws to protect our kids online or the lack thereof. And we will talk about that. But first, you have kind of a unique situation that you're in and that you experienced an online harm within your family that is now indicating legislation to protect other children. And so let's talk about your son, Gavin, and his story. And if we could just start with, tell me about Gavin back in 2022. He's 17. Like, what was he into? What were his hobbies? I'd love to just get to know him.
Gavin was, I always say, opposite of the way I was, but a lot of the similarities in that he was the average teenager. He would get into a little bit of trouble, but nothing major. He had just graduated high school. I often say he was living his best life. Getting that confidence of feeling like I'm going off and I don't have to worry about bullying. I don't have to worry about all of these social restraints. Really into comic books. He loved skating. Skating became his outlet whenever he wanted to change his emotion, whether he was having trouble with a girlfriend or anything of that nature. So as I go around talking now, I often tell the teenagers to have a singular hobby that you can do for yourself. I call it running until you're done. But in order to change an emotion, sometimes you have to create motion. Just get those dopamines flowing.
And something that you can't have a screen when you're doing it, right? You have to be in your thoughts. Yeah. I love that.
Being present and just working it out. Like, to me, I'd rather, go to the gym or something to just give that physical exertion to kind of work out that anger. But July 27th of 2022, I came in from a political event. I was running, and in my district, pretty much the primary was the election. We are extremely one-sided in my district, so it was whoever won the primary was generally going to win the election.
Okay.
It was a very contentious election, and even as with any election, rumors get spread, lies are told, and Gavin happened to be included in some of those lies that were told. So I ended up having a lot of teenagers help out. And whenever we won, matter of fact, the screensaver on my phone, which is locked right now, so I can't see it, but I was going to show it to you, is a picture of my three boys embracing after the election because they felt like it was us. It wasn't just me.
Yeah.
I had just won my primary election, went to a political event, came back. Gavin had went to a Christian camp called Young Life and was there. He got saved at that camp, came back, had COVID. So we had him on quarantine. In his bedroom playing video games. I came in around midnight and I could hear him in his room. His brother, who was also a teen, 16 at the time, was asleep. And then his 4-year-old brother, we had him on the other wing of the house, sleeping to try and keep him away from them so that he didn't contact COVID.
Sure.
And I walked outside talking on the phone, came back in, and as I came back in, I was just laying in the bed reading emails, and Gavin came out of his bedroom, and he was very quiet. And with teenagers, typically, they're not very quiet, and just something told me to get up and check on him.
Yeah.
I got up, walked to see what he was doing, and as he came back, he was just in a pair of underwear. And he was kind of covering himself up. So to me, I'm thinking teenage boy, give him some privacy. I'm not going to reach in and give him a hug. And I just said, good night, buddy. I love you. He walked into the bathroom. I walked into the other room to lean down to kiss his 4-year-old brother on the head, tell him good night. And then I heard what sounded like a bowling ball crashing through shelves, and Gavin had shot himself. I didn't know what happened. Later on, we found out that Gavin was contacted by someone pretending to be a teenage girl on Instagram, started having conversation. They began to exchange images. And as soon as they began to exchange images, Gavin started to become a victim of sextortion. They started demanding money. In my mind, Gavin had just, like I said, he was living his best life. He'd got picked on in middle school. He'd got picked on in high school. And in my mind, he was thinking, I can't go through this again. And that's the reason he went that route. But what made it worse is the person that was extorting Gavin while we're still trying to bury him began to extort my 14-year-old cousin, my 16-year-old son who just lost his brother. And then even went as far to sending me a message a couple of days before what would have been Gavin's 18th birthday saying, did I tell you your son begged for his life, with the laughing face emoji? And my problem became, why didn't Meta take this account down? They knew from the investigation, they knew from the subpoena that this was a scammer to begin with, and they pulled the one account down. So it was a name and number 28. But they left up that same name with all these other numbers and all the multiple accounts that they had that look identical, same pictures, same, I would imagine the same server as well, but left them up to continue to extort additional teens, along with my family as well.
I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Was this a Nigerian man like some of the other cases?
It's still under investigation, so I can't really go too much into detail about it. Okay. But I am confident that our law enforcement will catch the people responsible. But I also found through the investigation that it's not a singular person. And typically with these scams, you know, you have other people that may be getting extorted as well that just become the money mules. Or the money launderers for these people because they don't have funds to pay them. Before it goes back.
Okay. And listeners can hear my interview with John DeMay. So he goes into detail on kind of how these rings work together. One's typing with the child, one's looking up information on their family, one's just to really be able to threaten, one's making a collage of imagery so that the kid really knows, like, I know who your family members and friends are. I mean, just making the threat so real and to be able to just get the child to pay money. Is that what he was looking for in Gavin's experience?
Yeah. In one of the images, it was a news headline where they plug in Gavin's image to make it look like it's going to go viral. With me being in politics, I'm sure Gavin doesn't really understand that a state house position, because what we see around here on the news might include a lot of me, but on national news, it's not that way. But our kids, and I often say this whenever I'm talking to parents and teens, what we have forgotten in this country is grace. We're too busy judging people for the mistakes that they make instead of looking at those mistakes made them the men or women that they have become today. And we as adults fall short on that. We do it in politics. We do it in life to where we are judging people on every little mistake that they have made. And then we, for often, you know, prior to the past couple of years, we would constantly tell kids, whatever you do online is with you forever. You'll never escape this. They see 18-year-olds lose scholarships for something they put on Twitter whenever they were 14. And they see that judgmental attitude. So they don't think that it is something that they can escape. And I do feel like, and one of the reasons I became so vocal about this issue is because I feel like if Gavin would have known this was more of a common occurrence, then maybe he would have came to me. But I think in his mind, he felt singularly targeted. And that this was something solely on him. And I remember having the discussion with my wife. You know, I wanted to get out of politics, and I was just going to drop out before the general election. My wife said, absolutely not. You're one of the few that can make a difference. Keep fighting and get up there and keep other kids from having to feel what Gavin felt. And I stayed quiet until November, until right before the general election. But I was scared because I was a county councilman that if I did lose my general election, I would lose my platform. And law enforcement had asked me to stay quiet on the issue because the scammer was even trying to say they were a political opponent and all that, they were hired by a political opponent. I mean, it was a lot of misinformation being shared.
Yeah.
And I came out publicly with my story on what would have been my last day as an elected official the day I resigned prior to the election. And I posted a 45-minute video on YouTube, which I think it had 14,000 views in under 24 hours, but it's still at like 14,000 views because now they've throttled it because I talk about suicide. And they put the warnings on there. Huh?
Yeah.
Yeah. But I came out with that story, and where I really feel bad as I look at people like James Woods and like Waylon Schaefer and, you know, the children that have taken their lives during that time period. And it makes me feel almost responsible that I wasn't screaming it from the mountaintops to get awareness to begin with. And I think we're up to 40 children now that have publicly taken their lives. Now, I deal with sextortion calls daily from people just searching online and finding me and asking for help, and teenagers.
Yeah.
I'm glad that people reach out to me, but I know that there are at least a dozen others that are not even public about it. That they have lost, you know, they've lost children to this crime, but they're more concerned about the shame, and they feel like they're going to ruin their child's reputation, or people are going to look at their child as some type of creep. And I often equate that to the 80s. We preached abstinence very heavily, and everyone was having sex, but some girl gets pregnant and everybody wants to point at her and call her a whore. And it's that judgmental attitude of, this is something that teens are doing. Whether we like it or not, this is their culture. And how do we address it? How do we put a stop to it from here? And ultimately, I think it boils down to big tech allowing child sex abuse material to exchange on their platforms. You know, Meta blurs out the image and says this may contain child sex abuse material.
Right.
If we took the real world approach and I handed you an envelope full of child pornography and said, Nikki, this may contain child sex abuse material, would I not be held responsible for giving you that to begin with?
Right.
Yes. But yet that's exactly what they do. And they are absolved. These are the world's richest companies, and they're the ones that are immune to civil liability. I mean, everyone's suing them. We got 42 attorney generals suing Meta alone, not to mention the problems that we have with Snap. And now, as we are introducing AI, we're seeing whole new waves of issues that are coming up.
You mentioned the platforms that are making these announcements that they are helping us to fight sextortion by doing things like Meta is identifying accounts from some of these areas where there are sextortion rings and taking down their accounts, or labeling accounts as scammy behavior and limiting what they can see on teenager accounts, or doing things like blurring the nude imagery. Do you feel like these updates, let's focus on Meta. Do you feel like the updates that they've made in the last year or two are actually helping to fight sextortion?
I'll say what I've said many times. It's kind of like whenever your dog craps on the porch instead of crapping in your house. It's a step forward, but it's not exactly what you want. They have the ability to stop it 100%. But they put their profits above protecting children. That becomes my problem. And not just Meta. I mean, Apple and Google could stop this with the wave of a wand if they held these app stores responsible, or the apps, to say, look, you are a danger to children and you're not doing enough, so we're going to remove you from the app store. They would fix the problem like that. But yet they don't. I mean, and truthfully, in all honesty, I follow your podcast a lot for knowledge. I'm very thankful for how knowledgeable you are and how you advocate to get the information out.
Thank you.
But Apple houses more child pornography in the world than any other company. And they do it in the name of privacy. So, and if we can't apply our real world laws to our digital world, then we are really having trouble. And whenever we start looking at, I'll use the example, I'm in South Carolina. There's a lot of gun owners and everyone's worried about their Second Amendment rights or their privacy rights being exposed. If I opened a storage facility and said, I'm only going to store guns, the majority of people are law-abiding citizens, but I'm also going to store guns for criminals and I'm going to store guns for terrorists. Everyone would, and law enforcement, you can't get into them unless you have that digital ID. Everyone would lose their mind. But that's exactly what Apple does with child pornography. And it just blows me away that there's not more outrage within the public.
Yeah. Okay. So I want to talk about that more. But with Apple, they just announced that they are going to be, is it blurring the nude images in, if it's a minor, is under 13, it gets blurred and then the teen can still view it? Is that what the update is?
Under 13? I mean, that's one of our biggest problems.
I know.
In law, we define adult and minor. And our biggest problem was Section 230 back in the day, us putting an age of 13. And that's my problem with a lot of the legislation that we're seeing put forth. They're bowing down to big tech and saying, well, let's make it 16. Let's make it 15. And they're creating all of these different ages. Bottom line is we have adult material and we have people that are not of age to access adult material. If it's adult material, then it should be 18 and under, or under 18 should not be able to access it. Period.
Can we agree that minors should not, because we know the technology exists, I believe that minors should not be able to send or receive nude imagery on any online platform. Would you agree?
I agree 100%. The company that I've been working with for the past 6 months, well, start back a little bit further. I met with ICAC, and I think you've had Jim on with Operation Light Shine that does he's a former HSI agent, Homeland agent.
I haven't had Jim on, but let me know.
A wealth of knowledge.
Yeah, okay.
He was part of the Sextortion documentary that came out. But whenever I met with Jim Cole, he was saying that the problem is that we could utilize AI as a nudity detection. But the problem with that is we can't use victimized images or victims' images off of the dark web. And as with any AI, it can be, you could train it to say every cat is a dog or a dog is a cat. So you need to have a pure training method. So with situations such as, or companies such as, say, Bark, or this company I'm working with Cyberdive, parents pay for, a monthly service to be able to protect their child. So you're confident that pedophiles or scammers are not paying to be a part of this. Well, what Cyberdive did was they created an AI app now that is nudity detection. So on their new Aqua One phone that's coming out, if it points at genitalia at all or nudity at all, then it automatically locks down the phone and it sends the parent the image to decide this is child sex abuse material or it is not. So the parent then begins to train the AI model. And the same thing on receiving. If someone sends your child a nude image, then it automatically locks it down until the parent decides. And the reason you have to have the parent influence is because whenever you first start off, let's say you're covered in mud. Well, if you're covered in mud, it might say, well, this is a nude image. The parent can look at it and say, no, this is safe, and can train that model at that time.
Okay, that makes sense. But what about Snapchat? Because I've heard that Snapchat won't allow anyone into their API to actually be able to scan the snaps that are sent.
This doesn't matter at all. This is all based, the way Cyberdive works is it is a DVR of a phone. So the parent can look at what
On
their
the
kid's
phone.
doing at
Okay.
any time.
Okay.
So it's going through the device. So whatever that screen sees, the device controls.
Wow. Interesting. Okay. Great.
So they don't have to work with each app store because it's not an app. It is an actual device. So if your kid's up, say at 11 o'clock at night, now I don't agree with, I tell people, make your devices and your computers only for public spaces.
Yeah.
Don't allow them to have them in the bathroom, in the bedroom. But let's say your kid's up late saying, I've got to study for a test tomorrow. And you've got them on there. Well, anytime if you want them to see live what they're seeing on their phone, you can. Or you could, let's say you went to sleep and you want to know why were they up to 1 o'clock in the morning. You can go back and rewind and see everything that's on the phone. So number one, the kids are going to be more careful about what they're doing because they know that their parents can see what's on the phone at any time. But for two, it's also, you can add those protection features or remove them if you want to, as with any device.
Right. Because there does come a time when you have to start developing that trust between you and the child where they're not feeling like they're being constantly surveilled, right? How do you feel like we walk that line?
It's difficult, and that's one of the conversations that I often have to have about Gavin.
Yeah.
Because we were at that stage. I mean, matter of fact, the week of him taking his life, we had sat down and had a conversation. I knew that he had been sexually active in the past, and he was very attracted to this girl. He liked her a lot, but she had kind of poked fun at him about going off to this Christian camp. And he had the conversation with me. He's like, Dad, I like her, but I don't know that this is going anywhere. And I had to explain to him there's a difference between attraction and compatibility. You might be really attracted to her, but y'all aren't compatible. And we were having those discussions, and I would often tell him, you're almost old enough to fight for this country. I'm here for advice.
Yeah.
But he would also get mad at me because I had all these parental controls on his phone. And, he's having to look up a website and he's like, I can't do it. And it's like, well, once you're 18, you'll be able to look at whatever you want to. But until then, I was confident that he was not looking at pornography on his phone because of those filters. And whenever we got the phone back, we found that he had 3 Twitter accounts. One was his personal. The other 2 were full pornography. And that infuriated me because Twitter allows 13-year-olds on there. And yet they have full pornography on there.
Wow.
And these scammers reach out to the kids, send them videos and to follow them. So all they do is get a message, start following that account, and they're getting this daily pornography. And they've learned to just create a separate account so they can do so.
Do you think that Elon Musk thinks that it is appropriate for teenagers to be doing that? Because I know I've heard someone at Apple said it's healthy for teens to sext. They should be doing that. And I wonder if companies like Snap and X are like, teens should be doing that. It's it's healthy. Do you feel like that's the...
I don't feel like Elon Musk feels that way. I believe that his belief is freedom of information. I just simply wish that he would make it if he would age gate it.
Yeah.
Then everything would be a lot better.
Yeah.
But I don't believe that his approach is anything to do with children being able to access pornography. To hear Apple say something like that, I mean, if it's a guy that says something like that to me, I'm knocking their teeth out.
Yeah.
You are advocating for child pornography.
Yeah. Yeah.
And why anyone would that should be a national headline.
Yeah.
By itself.
Yeah. I was told that in confidence. I'm not going to name who's told me that, but somebody that would know that. So
yeah, I mean, it infuriates me. And I think it's not just that. I mean, I think algorithms, and let's look at history, the way the, Germany and the Nazi party really gained power was by propaganda of the youth and was by skewing that narrative. Our algorithms are propaganda times 200. They are taking away our children's ability to think for themselves. They're taking away our adults' ability to think for themselves as well.
Yeah.
I mean, I have people politically, it has gone crazy on both sides because people go down these rabbit holes, and you have to intentionally seek out the opposite side so you make sure you're not falling down these rabbit holes. Mm-hmm. But whenever it comes to children, you know, a girl wants to lose 5 pounds to fit into a bathing suit, and the algorithm feeds her to these sites where people are, whether it's cross-platform or within the platform, mm-hmm. to where people are struggling with eating disorders. Mm-hmm. I also believe that it's causing a lot of our gender dysphoria that we are seeing now, because I believe it. And I use the example, let's say you have two 12-year-old boys playing by a creek. One gets an erection and goes home and Googles, am I gay because I got an erection around my best friend? Mm-hmm. That algorithm is automatically going to start feeding them more LGBTQ stuff, and feeding them down to where they end up on chat boards with people who are truly struggling with their gender ideology. And this is such a developmental time, mm-hmm. to where people cannot think for themselves. That's the reason they are children, and we should protect them. And yet we've got Congress sitting there with thumbs up their butt whenever we put things like Kids Online Safety Act, mm-hmm. ahead, which I don't even believe is the perfect bill, but it's the first step, mm-hmm. in 25 years. Yeah. 25 years ago, it took me an hour to download a Wu-Tang Clan song. I mean, 24 years ago, we were warning people that your computer is going to crash at the end of 1999. That's how ignorant we were whenever we wrote this bill.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's talk about the Kids Online Safety Act, which passed 91-3 in the Senate, and we were really hopeful. And then I was in the room during the Energy and Commerce Committee markup in the House and watched the fury by these representatives at the fact that there had been changes made to the bill the last minute, and they didn't even have time to review it. And they were changes that made parents very concerned about what this bill will now actually do, and saying this won't protect kids now. So what's going on in the House? Like, tell me a little inside scoop on is there still a chance?
Now, this is my personal opinion, mm-hmm. as being in politics and what I have seen.
Yeah.
It is, and I say this often, politicians are worried about their next election. Leaders are worried about the next generation. Mm-hmm. What we have is a bunch of disingenuous politicians in leadership right now.
Okay.
We've seen it pass 91-3 in the Senate. Mm-hmm. And the main opponent of it was Rand Paul, which is someone that I typically looked up to. This is somebody, I got involved in politics because of Ron Paul. It was like, yeah, this guy knows what he's talking about. So I even supported Rand Paul in the 2016 election, mm-hmm. for president. This is the guy that if you asked me one Congress member I looked up to the most, this was the guy.
What happened?
And then I hear his comments, on the Kids Online Safety Act, which were about as ignorant as can be. Mm-hmm. It's spoken from big tech's mouth, out of his mouth to everyone's ears, mm-hmm. and find out that his chief of staff used to be the head lobbyist for Net Choice. I mean, how much more disingenuous can you get? Then we go to the House, and whenever something transfers over, if you take up the Senate bill, then it should be easy to move forward and move fast. But I was told back in January, even if it passes the Senate, Guffey, they're not going to take it up in the House. They're not going to push it forward. And I was told this back in January, because big tech's money is not going to fund the politician. It's going to fund their groups that they support. So if you've got, let's just say, and I'll use the example because I often thought that the Freedom Caucus candidates were the ones fighting the good fight. I'm more of a Ron DeSantis, Jim DeMint type Freedom Caucus person. Mm-hmm. But what we're seeing out of what we currently have is money go from big tech to go to these groups out of, say, Texas and Virginia. Mm-hmm. And then they use those groups because they want to gain control in the states, and they put it against state candidates. And it's more about their caucus. Just as an example, in South Carolina, over $100,000 spent in one House race for door knocking. That's to defeat another Republican to replace them with a Freedom Caucus member.
Wow.
Just so they can gain power there. But once you take that money, then you're kind of obligated to sit there and push their message. And the people that I thought were most righteous and the ones fighting the good fight, the ones that were swamp fighters, I'm finding are becoming the swamp, because they are listening to big tech, and big tech is the biggest lobby in the game. Mm-hmm. And they are, and they can sit here and say, well, this just doesn't work. Well, you've had 25 years.
Mm-hmm.
Why not have a solution that's going to work? Mm-hmm. And why not get something through? You knew this was going through the Senate in January.
Yeah.
Our Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, Majority Leader, Scalise. Why haven't you done something to correct these issues before it even gets there? I find it very disingenuous.
How is this allowed? And how can they put their power and their campaigns ahead of literal children's lives? Aren't they?
Well, they don't. They don't in public. What they do is they make the claim that we're trying to fight for your rights, but then they spread the narrative that we're going to take away everyone else's rights. And this is somehow going to infringe on adults' privacy or give too much power to bureaucrats, which who gives the power to the bureaucrats? Congress does. Mm-hmm. So if you don't like the power that a bureaucrat has, roll back the power. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Create more oversight over those agencies.
Yeah.
We have the least effective Congress since the Great Depression. And it's all due to money. Mm-hmm. It's all due to worrying about getting elected again. And as I said, politicians worry about their next election. Leaders worry about the next generation. It's been 25 years. Get off your tail and pass something. Mm-hmm. Whenever I own my businesses, I would often tell employees, don't bring me problems, bring me solutions. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And only thing that they're doing is constantly arguing over which problem there is without offering the solution.
Mm-hmm. And without even listening to parents' stories, won't these leaders refuse to meet with you guys and other parents, right?
Well, I went to New Orleans last week and did a press conference with some parents. Scalise's office there, congressional office, which we didn't expect him to be there, where they at least allowed us to come in and talk. Good. But we haven't had a meeting. And what I want, and truthfully, politically speaking, Speaker Johnson, Majority Leader Scalise, they are new in power. Mm-hmm. They are judged based on the amount of seats that they protect come this next election. Oh. Right? Mm-hmm. So I call it the kill one to save 100. If your goal was to say, big tech's going to put $500 million against all of these Republicans, or we can sit here and make it look like to our constituents, we're going to take this bill up, but then not allow it to move. So that way we can say we fought the good fight. It just didn't get there because the Senate didn't do their job, or we didn't do, and try and claim victory without anything passing. Mm-hmm. That's where the disingenuousness comes up. Mm-hmm. If they would take the bill up and put it to the floor to where we can see where each House member stands on protecting children, then we can make that decision. But they refuse to do that because they don't want to. And their argument becomes, matter of fact, I was arguing with Rand Paul's chief of staff last night on Twitter. Mm-hmm. The argument is, the Senate knew the House wasn't going to take it up. That's the reason they passed it 91-3. And there are games that happen like that. I mean, we see that often, but somebody's got to be the bad guy. Somebody, in my opinion, if you're in a leadership, it's time to let your balls drop and do the right thing.
Yeah. So what can parents do here? Do we need to elect somebody new? Do we need to campaign? Like, what do parents need to do?
If they're not going to hear it, and I think there's two solutions, and the questions that I asked Lisa's office, is there enough time to get it to the floor for a vote in the lame duck session? Mm-hmm. If there isn't, can we pass a budget proviso, put it in the budget to where we have the law in place for 1 year while we work out the differences so we can protect children now? Because if not, and my comments were, Speaker Johnson, Majority Leader Scalise, you have blood on your hands for every single child that dies going forward while we do not have this passed. This isn't this isn't a end-all be-all bill. And we are never, politicians or politics in general has to learn that we have to be reactive. Trying to be proactive for something such as tech, by the time we get the details worked out, we've got a new issue that's arrived.
Yep.
So we have to learn to put something out there. If we see it's too restrictive, we lean to learn to go back from whence we came and correct the issue. Mm-hmm. But we have to put the stop in place right now. And big tech is showing you with a $500 million spent in lobbying that that's the last thing that they want. Mm-hmm. Europe's doing it. Australia's doing it. Mm-hmm. Why aren't we doing it here?
Yeah. And
it all boils down to how corrupt our system is and the money that is corrupting our system.
What parents are probably realizing and here, if they're not familiar with all of this, is it's been extremely difficult to get anything passed to protect kids online, specifically at a federal level. And so we can't expect there to be protections built into these platforms. So what do you advise parents, given that it's just on us right now?
I think that in order to force change, it's going to take a social movement. Mm-hmm. It's time for all of us parents to stand up to the false narratives that are being put out there. The excuses that we are being given on why they can't protect kids. Mm-hmm. And this narrative of it is your job to be a parent and you can protect your child whenever we have schools forcing children to have devices and they're trying to train them for the real world and the predators can then contact them. Everything that we are doing is, you can't even allow kids on a game like Roblox that used to be safe for 8-year-olds because these predators are out there.
Mm-hmm. Pausing here to talk about tools that could save your child's life, and that is the Bark phone, the Bark app, and the Bark watch. Bark goes way beyond device mirroring, using advanced AI to scan text messages, social media, images, videos, and audio for threats like drug content, cyberbullying, and even child sexual abuse material. The harms of social media are scary, and tools like Bark can give you peace of mind. The Bark phone is the most customizable kids phone with text and social media monitoring built in. It's the safest option. If you are going with an Android or an iPhone, please consider layering on the Bark app, which is high-tech parental monitoring that scans their activities for harmful content, allows you to create screen time schedules, block certain websites and apps, and a ton more. And the Bark watch is new. It can help you monitor activity while delaying access to a smartphone.
The simple solution on all of this would be to truly advocate for big tech to make the changes, and use products that are out there to protect your children online the best way that you can. But just know that there's always going to be a go around. Mm-hmm. And we can't helicopter our children because, as you said, we have to allow them to grow.
Yeah.
And I think the most important thing, truthfully, if we could stop algorithms being used on our children, I think we would see a huge increase. We've seen it as we have banned phones in schools, how much, and it's the parents that are worried about it, but the kids are actually praising the way their mental health has improved since doing so. Yeah. And I tell parents, don't allow devices in your bedroom, in the child's bedroom. Make sure they're in public spaces. Limit screen time. And that's difficult with me having a 18-year-old and a 6-year-old. My 18-year-old, I am having the conversations about the dangers out there.
Yeah.
But even though I've had the conversations, even some of Gavin's friends that were fully aware of what happened to him still fell victim to sextortion after him.
Yeah.
The biggest difference is they knew that they could reach out for help.
And that's really
And
important.
we've got to have those conversations.
Yeah.
What took so long to take down 63,000 extortionist accounts just on Instagram, just in Lagos, Nigeria, in one day? Why didn't you do this before? How many of those 63,000 targeted our children the day before?
Yeah.
It's been 2 years since I've been yelling this.
Right.
And you're telling me just in one country you were, and I'm sure that's not even all of them. But if you had the ability to decide who they were, then you have the ability to do that across the board. Why are we allowing anyone? We have physical borders to protect our children. And that's an argument I'll say with parents. We have physical borders where we can lock our doors and we feel like our child is safe at home. And as a father, it's my job to protect my children. I was just too busy trying to protect them from the physical world and not realizing that it's the digital enemy that is coming after my child. Right. And I can't do anything to protect them at that point whenever I have these companies facilitating. They're the ones who open the window to the bedroom to allow the criminals in there. Yeah. They're fully aware that it's criminals. They're aware that they're pretending to be somebody they're not. They're aware that they have all of these numerous profiles. And yet I can't tell you how many times I report stuff, and I report it directly as any other citizen would and never get something taken down.
Yeah. I mean, videos of kids choking themselves, that is leading to other kids to die by the choking challenge. And they're getting reported and staying up for years and have millions of views. We as parents cannot trust these companies to keep our children safe. In fact, they're leading them down dangerous paths through algorithms and access to predators. So when you talk about advocating societally, it's about delaying access. They're not safe for kids. Don't let your kids on them. Talk to them about why, because unfortunately our kids are being given iPads in kindergarten, and those often have access to social media sites, or their friend's going to show them something. And so they're still going to encounter things. So those conversations are super important. And I think the third piece, and you mentioned, is the monitoring software, anything, Bark, whatever, but something to alert you if something it comes across their device that can be harmful. So
yes,
that's what we can do now. And then talking to friends and schoolmates and all kinds of people about what you've learned related to this so that they can make the same decisions. Because the only reason our kids want to be on social media is because their friends are. It's not actually making them feel better or fun. It's really stressful for them in the end is what they're sharing. They're only on there because they don't want to be left out.
And one of the things that we did in South Carolina whenever we passed Gavin's law was we mandated the Department of Education to educate every student, teacher, and send out notifications to the parents, along with law enforcement as well, on what Gavin's law is. Okay. What that has become in many schools, they don't limit it to, which of course in elementary school, because of sexual activity, you don't want to really talk about that, but you teach stranger danger. So we left it very bland for that reason. But once you start having sexual education, you need to make sure that they're aware of the dangers that exist. But that has reached so many students alone to let them know how common this is. But it also made a big improvement with our local law enforcement. Law enforcement is getting so frustrated because they are constantly dealing with these crimes. And if you entered law enforcement, you have a duty and you have this feeling that it is your job to protect. And you know that this is something, well, the mindset was that this was happening overseas. And their argument became, so how do we protect children then? And you would hear law enforcement say, well, I could arrest you for sending images. And I would get very angry and say, that's the equivalent to telling a woman she shouldn't have wore a short skirt. These are victims coming to you for help. But now that they are educated that there is a reporting system, you can report it and it go into the FBI Guardian system. And there are resources out there such as NCMEC. I often refer people to NCMEC. NCMEC not only has the reporting capability with tech and with law enforcement, but they also follow up with mental health counseling for the family and for the victims, which is huge. I was so impressed with that whenever I went to the Hope Awards last month to learn that, that they have become, I used to send people to FBI.gov or Know to Protect, and now I'm sending people directly to NCMEC. Do your reporting there. They will get in touch with whatever law enforcement needs to happen, and they have the resources there.
Okay. So if which I've had multiple people reach out to me saying my child is being sextorted right now. He doesn't want anybody to know. So he's telling me not to report it. First of all, I tell them, if you don't report it, then this scammer is going to continue to scam other kids and hurt other children. So you have to report it. So do you recommend local law enforcement and NCMEC, both?
Yes. And the hard thing is I have many teens that don't want to report it.
I know.
And I explain to them, you might not have got extorted if the person before you had reported this person. No one's going to know once you report it. But I always request that you report it to NCMEC right away. They have 24-hour call center. I often say you need to report it with your local law enforcement. Because your local law enforcement, if they're attacking you, then typically they're going off of your friends list or have you within that network. And often the scammers now will take over someone's. So as part of the extortion, if you don't have money, they get your passwords to take over your account. So now they see all of your friends and they begin to extort as if they were you. to begin with.
Great.
So it might even be someone that you think that you know, and it really not be that person. And what used to be a crime that was happening overseas, what we are seeing is, since the Yahoo Boys posted this stuff on TikTok and YouTube on how to perform this, people within our prisons are doing it now. This is another federal government issue. So federal government allows cell phone jamming, but state prisons are not allowed to implement cell phone jamming technology because of a law written in the 30s that gives the FCC authority that you cannot block a federal airway. So cell phones in prisons, and prisoners are performing, they call it Johnning in prison instead of sextortion. And they are learning, they're paying anywhere from 6 to 10. I'm just talking about South Carolina. I don't even know the stats for other states. $6,000 to $10,000 per mobile device to get it to begin with. So that tells you how much money they're making off of getting the device. And then you look at the, tens of thousands of devices that have just been confiscated within our prisons. But not only that, I know in South Carolina, we've had at least 20 prisoners charged with the sextortion of having devices since my son's death. And the last one in July was sent to Michigan responsible for someone's death. And these are within our prisons. We're locking up these criminals to protect them from society, and yet they are attacking our children from behind bars now. And they have nothing better to do with their time.
Oh, my God. Please, parents, talk to your kids about this, because it's coming from all angles. I mean, even kids at their school are doing this to each other. It's like...
And now these criminals get out of jail. They can't get a job because they have a felony record or anything else. But hey, I made enough money to spend $6,000 to $10,000 in prison. So now I'm going to do this. And it becomes organized crime within our gangs, within our organized crime units of free people. And it's becoming, it is becoming the new drugs because it is so profitable.
Yeah. Okay. Anything else? There's so many directions I wanted to go with you that I didn't get to. So we're probably going to have another conversation.
I'd love to just chat. You could record 3 hours and then just cut and piece whatever you want at any time.
But what else do parents need to be thinking about related to sextortion, how to protect their kids, how to talk to them, anything we didn't cover?
The biggest thing I tell parents is realize these are children. I'm 44 years old. If biologically, if I see a nude image or something that turns me on, blood leaves my brain and I am not thinking as clearly. Have some grace.
Yeah.
Understand that kids are going, and they have raging hormones. There's a reason we don't allow them to make life-altering decisions until they're 18.
Yeah.
But have the grace with the kids. Whenever you do talk to them, and I know your ultimate goal and what you're most fearful for from that point becomes their mental health. Make sure that those lines of communications are open. I often tell people, I don't know if you can see my pen, but the less than 3 symbol is the last symbol that Gavin sent out before he took his life. He sent it on a black screen, and it was his way of telling his friends and family that he loved them. And I started because at first I didn't know why Gavin took his life.
Yeah.
And I was always that alpha male personality of, men don't cry. And I think whenever I was searching, as they were still waiting to remove his body from the house, I'm trying to find peace, and I couldn't find anything at that moment. So I started going on Facebook Live, snot face crying, and just saying, talk to your children. Have these conversations. I always thought that it was less manly to cry, and I'm thinking, did I cause this? And to me, truthfully, what we should be teaching our kids is it's more manly to own your emotions and say, now what? Have these conversations. Don't make your kids be something just to conform within society of what other people think. And I think I learned more of that from my son. But on the mental health aspect, I thought if he took his life, it had to be he was depressed. And that just didn't coincide with anything.
Right.
This was the happiest version that I had ever seen of Gavin.
Yeah.
And as I started researching, we found out, or the statistics came up and said the majority of suicides are impulsive. That was shocking to me. I didn't realize that. And the average time someone makes a decision to the time they commit the act is 20 minutes. And at a mental health forum for SCEPV I was at, a lady said that if there is a gun involved, it's less than 3 minutes, which I have not been able to find that statistic.
Yeah.
But from that point forward, we named the nonprofit Less Than Three, and our message is tomorrow needs you. I would love to get it large enough, not just for teens, but I think of vets sitting there. Yeah. If they just had the suicide hotline, if we can get past that 3 minutes to 3 hours to 5 hours, if we can make it to tomorrow, everything changes.
That impulsivity is huge. And when I talk to neuroscientists or psychotherapists, they're like, these kids, it's just the fact that their brain is still developing and that prefrontal cortex that controls that impulsiveness is just not online yet. So kids are always going to make impulsive decisions. And that's why we have to be so careful about what they can access and having these conversations early, because unfortunately with these platforms, they're going to be accessing things that could take that impulsivity down the wrong road, down a really, really dangerous road, whether it be sextortion or the choking challenge, things like that, kids should be able to make those type of mistakes and not die from them is what I keep hearing from all of you parents. And it's just, I so appreciate you sharing your story so that millions of other parents know to talk to their kids about this, know to talk about it early, and know how to make safer decisions than they maybe would have otherwise to protect their kids. So we are all so grateful to you. And I want to hear what's going on with your case because I'm interested to know what they find in that too. So
on the lawsuit?
Yeah. Well, we didn't talk about the lawsuit.
I'm suing Meta.
Okay, sorry. I didn't know about directly. That. Yeah.
So okay. I'm one of the sole lawsuits against them.
Okay.
Instead of the class action suit. However, it's not a bellwether case.
Yeah.
But it's still tied up based on all the other cases.
Okay.
I'm not heavily involved in that lawsuit.
Okay.
But I want to force change.
Yeah.
And that becomes the key.
Excuse me. And yes,
real
I think
change,
lawsuits,
not what they're doing.
Yes. And you're on the inside seeing that legislation is just taking too long and it's stalling. So we need lawsuits is the other way we can force change and say to these companies, this is not okay. Look what happened. And you had a fault in this. And so going forward, you're not allowed to do that anymore. So
there's multiple ways. If we've got 50 states.
Yeah.
If each state could write an age gate bill, and it all be a little bit different to where big tech has to challenge it in every court. That becomes very costly.
Yeah. Okay.
Not to mention the age gating, but I mean, we've got, the Take It Down Act. If we just being able to report and pull down images, or as a COSA with the duty of care, we've got the Age Appropriate Design Act. That we can implement. I personally believe one way to handle a lot of this is taking the NIL approach, which is what we do in college athletics, name, image, and likeness. And if you are using my name, image, and likeness, and I demand that it be pulled down, and you don't, then that gives me civil action against you.
Okay. There's solutions here, and we need parents, just regular parents. You don't have to know about all these bills, but if you contact your representative and say, what are you doing to get kids protected online in this coming year? Because I'm worried about my kids. That's helpful, right? If we just contact our rep about this topic.
Yeah. And let them know this is the most important thing. This is the next generation.
Yeah.
Is to protect our children. And we need, because of our messed up federal law, we need each state to step up. Okay. And this is so important regardless of which part of the aisle that you are on. I'll use the example of Montana as probably one of the freest states. They were the last to enact a speed limit, but yet they were the first to ban TikTok.
Interesting.
That should tell you how important this is across the board. Is it a big talking point for campaigns? Not until enough people are calling and complaining about it.
Okay.
But it is affecting our mental health across the board, and our children are in danger. Not just our children, our elderly, our 20-something year olds that are on these dating apps. I mean, everyone is becoming under attack now.
Yeah. Okay. And we have to speak up. We can't let this keep happening. So parents, I hope you're inspired to speak up and make some changes in your home and talk to your friends about it and really start to get our kids protected online because they are currently not. And I, again, appreciate your time and your sharing of your story. And we are going to stay in touch and have more conversations soon, I'm sure.
I'd love to. Sorry, I talk so much and get off subject, but
I love
you could always do a bullet point, but I can talk forever on this. This is my passion until the day that I die.
Yeah.
Is to make sure that these kids are protected online.